Okay, I'm going to talk about campaigning from now on, so dealing with the issues that Delia has highlighted. I want to start off by thanking Karen for reminding everyone that we are lawyers, but I want to show that I'm a true lawyer and start off with a disclaimer. I'm not a practicing lawyer anymore, nor is Delia. We do not have insurance, and we do not expect to be sued for anything that we've said.
But you do expect to be paid?
Of course, generously. The other thing actually related to the law is Gareth gave us a lovely introduction about the campaigning that's been done so far and made the point that a number of people involved, particularly at British and Europe level, are lawyers. I actually want to make the point that only a couple of us are lawyers, if you like, who've practiced in the past. The miraculous thing, I think, about British and Europe is there is a steering committee of 10 people, which includes people with all the skills that have been necessary for this campaign. And very much the same is true of the 3 million across the channel. That's to say, we've got professional lobbyists, Cos is a professional lobbyist, and the 3 million's got 2, we've got 2, who just know which buttons to push in Brussels and in London, and that is terribly important. We've got a guy who was a lifelong servant, if you can put it that way, of the Conservative Party, who is really fed up with the Conservative Party. But he knows a lot of people. We have a sort of secret back channel into number 10 through that, so that we can get information to them, even though they don't want to accept that that's happening. And the other thing we've got, which has been hugely important, is several people who are really skilled with social media, who have built up large groups in the countries or the groups that they operate. Calba in France has built up Remain in France Together, Rift, from nothing to a really very large body with, I think, something like 15,000 followers. And they are very cohesive, they present a very strong message. She gives amazing amounts of information to these people. And it's all those skills that have come together to make what I think has been hopefully an effective campaign. We've certainly been effective in getting a lot of high-level access and quite a lot of publicity. And we've got a certain amount of work on the ground. Let's hope we can take it a step further, and that's what I want to talk about now. I wanted just to in a sense, repeat what Gareth said about the lobbying and the work we've done so far, just to highlight the levels at which we've been operating. And British in Italy tends to do the Italian stuff, British in Europe tends to do the UK and European stuff. In Italy, our main dealings have been with particularly a couple of government civil servants working for the Foreign Affairs Ministry. But we've also dealt with politicians of all colours, particularly with the change in government. We got used to dealing with PD representatives. We've now met people from other parties, and we try to work together cross-party because we really don't want to be involved in any particular group. We've met most recently, the highest official member was Sottosegretario Picchi, who is a Lega Sottosegretario in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who's very close to Salvini, who also happens to be a British citizen, which was something we done. So we had a
Salvini's a British citizen.
No. Salvini's not.
We need to get that to the media now.
In Italy, we've also been campaigning, as Gareth indicated, through Syndici, getting people to go and see their syndico, to take the message to them, really to bring pressure on the Italian government to legislate, because that's our concern at the moment. We've been given nice promises, that now has to be converted into law, because they accept that it requires a law to give us the protection that they say they're going to give us. And we've given evidence in the Italian Parliament, we've met a number of politicians in Italy. We've done quite a lot of work at that level, really going back to the beginning. At EU level, we've had trips, usually, almost invariably with the 3 million actually, because that's worked very well together, both in the obvious sense of we're all in the same boat, so we should work together, and secondly, in the sense of, let's take Italy as a classic example, something like 700,000 Italians living in the UK, something like probably less than 65,000 British citizens living in Italy. They want to do the best for us in order to ensure that the best result is obtained for their citizens in the UK. But beyond that, we've done it with, actually I just solidarity, because we feel very much we're in the same boat. And we've spoken to officials of the Commission, the task force of the Commission, which has been dealing with the negotiations. We've spoken to people outside the the task force, but Commission people who are dealing with implementation. We've spoken to the European Parliament groupings, particularly groupings with the various MPs. One of our greatest supporters there is Barbara Spinelli, who is the daughter of Altiero Spinelli, who dreamt up the idea of the European Union while sitting in prison on Ventotene during the war. At UK level, we've had slightly less high-level meetings, I have to say. We've never met the equivalent of Michel Barnier, if you want to count the various secretaries of state as somehow the equivalent of Michel Barnier. But we've never met the Secretary of State. We have had meetings finally, with the Minister Robin Walker at DEXU. We've had meetings with the committee, which Gareth gave evidence to right at the beginning, and various other parliamentary committees and politicians. We've had quite close relationships with the Liberal Party, or Liberal Democrats, who've been obviously very pro-EU, and also with some Labour Party front bench spokesmen. Obviously there are issues about the Labour Party's attitude to Brexit, but they've been very supportive on citizens' rights and have asked parliamentary questions and tried to put pressure. So those are the various avenues that we've been following. And then in addition to that, of course, there's been the media. And the media campaign, I think, has grown both through social media and conventional media, or traditional media, has grown over a period of time. I just wanted to look at how that relates to the issues which confront us now, as highlighted by Delia. First thing we need to sort out is the details of our new rights. She rightly pointed out the tension between the aspiration to give us rights as close as possible to the withdrawal agreement and the stated intention to do this through the means of third country national long-term residence status. We need to tie them down on how they're going to resolve particular aspects of that. One thing which is quite interesting in this context, particularly I think in Italy, is this. We wrote a paper, British and Europe wrote a paper let me wind back a bit. The idea that third country national status and long-term residence status for third country nationals should be used as the device to give us rights in the event of no deal came from the European Commission in November and December in a couple of papers that they wrote. We wrote a paper for British and Europe very critical of that because we were saying basically it's too little, too late, and it doesn't give us very much. And the Italian representatives we've been dealing with said they find that paper really useful in trying to formulate their response to the crisis that they're facing in respect of our rights. And so we intend to follow up with similar approaches to the Italian government now. Probably next week we'll send them something highlighting the problems they face and the issues that need to be resolved and trying to get them to resolve in a way which is most satisfactory from our point of view. We'll do that with a letter and ask for a meeting, and I suspect we will have a meeting before the end of the month because they've been pretty responsive in dealing with our requests. At the same time, quite interestingly, the politicians are moving to action. There is in Milano on Monday a press conference given by largely PD, but there's also a guy from Forza Italia who will be speaking to support a law that's been put forward by PD people in the Italian Parliament, calling upon the government to take steps to deal with Brexit in relation to citizens' rights, but also in relation to all the other matters, such as financial derivatives and the things that have to be dealt with. And effectively saying, you cannot leave this any longer, you've got to legislate now. So that's a good initiative that we will be supporting, but we have to be very careful not to ally with PD on that, or not even to ally with PD and Forza Italia, because it's absolutely essential that we remain completely neutral in terms of political parties in this country. And I have to say, I'm not just saying that. We have actually found, as Gareth said, since our first meeting, the Italian politicians and civil servants have always been absolutely clear with us that they do want to stay and they do want to be able to work and live as far as possible, as we've been able to date.
I'd also can I just say that they've also been very good at giving us access in a way that in Britain it's been much more difficult. It's been much more having to get to work behind the scenes. Here they have been very good at giving us access. Our real problem, as Jeremy's saying, is getting some actual pinning them down, exactly. It's not just the nice words, it's we need that legislation, we need to see exactly what it is. But
which leads nicely on to the next point I was going to make, which is the ANCI campaign.
Yeah.
ANCI is the group of sindaci throughout Italy, and it was a suggestion actually from an Italian civil servant, not one in place anymore, that we approach the sindaci and try and get them to put pressure through ANCI on the government to legislate. Because A, we have the problem of we need to know what our rights are on the 30th of March, and B, they have the problem of managing us because they deal with the public services and our access to those public services, whether they're health, whether they're having a car, whether they're registering your presence, are all basically administered at local level here. So the idea was to do that, and that campaign is something which we're carrying on. We've slightly changed it. We started off at the beginning of November with a letter to the president of ANCI, it was the Sindaco of Bari, saying, nothing's happened, we've heard nothing, this is desperate, only 5 months away, we will have no rights, what are you going to do? And they wrote back saying, we'll monitor the situation, it was a slight response. And they also explained to us the rights we would have under the withdrawal agreement, which they were confident and we were not, would be passed by the British Parliament. But now we've slightly modified the campaign because we've said, look, we wrote this letter, it sets out the issues remain the same, we have had assurances from the Italian government, we have no reason to doubt those, but you do need to move quickly because it's not just a question of passing the law, it's also a question of probably changing information systems, computer systems, because everything's done on computers. It's a question of training staff in the comune, in the health authorities, in the regione, in the provincia, throughout the public administration. There will need to be a lot of work to be done, and you can't do that overnight. Italy does have the advantage under its constitution of a very quick legislative route through the decreto, which becomes immediately effective. So they could pass a law on the 29th of March saying it's all going to be lovely, but that would not be a practical solution given that these things have to be explained to people who have to do them. If you happen to have to renew your tessera sanitaria on the 5th of April, you want to be in a position to say to the person who's dealing with your request, I am entitled to be here because the government has just passed a law and this is something you've been trained on in the last month.
that also actually applies equally, even if there is, if the meaningless vote goes away, we don't think it will. If there is a withdrawal agreement, it's the same problem for the local administration.
Because your status changes.
Because that status changes whatever happens.
Next I want to look at is freedom of movement, and this is a deal or no deal situation. As Delia has explained, our right to freedom of movement in the sense of the right to just pick up all our furniture and move to any other country of the European Union as a matter of right as EU citizens will go on the 30th of March. It might continue if the withdrawal agreement is made, but by and large it's going to go at some point in the very near future. And that's something we've never accepted. British and Europe has never accepted that because it is particularly important to lots of people. My impression is it's probably slightly less important to British citizens living in Italy than in some other countries, because a lot of people have come to Italy to live in Italy. In the north of Europe, around Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, France, Holland, all those countries, a lot of people have moved endlessly from one country to another for all sorts of reasons, but usually for work. And for many people, one of the things that Britons don't remember is that when Britain joined the EU, it wasn't an economic powerhouse, it was in some difficulty. And coming to the EU was a way out for many people who couldn't get work in the UK. But they came to the UK, to the EU, probably not just to live in Brussels for the rest of their life, but also to move around. And it was absolutely essential. So for an awful lot of people in the EU who are British citizens, that freedom of movement is very important. And we have been denied that. The British government has pushed for it in the negotiations. Push is probably slightly too strong a word. They have asked for it in the negotiations, and they have asked at our pressure repeatedly for it. The European Commission has been absolutely rock-like in refusing it. And I must say, I think it's the European Commission rather than the European countries which have led that.
Which I will go into.
Okay, great. Well, that will be because you can
Not that I
explain
agree
it.
with it, but there is a reason.
But so that's the position we're in. there is still some movement to try and get pressure to change that. There's, I think, likely to be a motion in the European Parliament to back us on that. They've always backed us on that, but ultimately the European Parliament is relatively weak as an institution in relation to the countries and the Commission. But we haven't given up, that's all I can say, but I'm not promising that we're going to get anything. More important in lots of ways is the other issue which Delia raised about freedom of movement, which is freedom of movement under the long-term residence directive that deals with third country nationals. Because, as she explained, there is a right of freedom of movement for those who are registered in an EU member state as a third country national with long-term residence. It's very much more limited than the right of freedom of movement we have as EU citizens. But it is there, and it's better than a poke in the eye with a burnt stick. So we are, one of the things we're going to Brussels, I think on the 21st of January is the next trip for British in Europe and the 3 million together to Brussels. And this time we're meeting the people from the Secretariat General who are in charge with no-deal Brexit preparations. And we want to push them very hard on this issue. How do you reconcile the suggestion to the various countries that they be generous, that's the word they've used, with the granting of third country national long-term residence status, with the fact that if you're too generous, you're also depriving those very same people of the rights of freedom of movement which others would have, which would mean we come literally bottom of the pile in terms of your status within Europe. So that's something we'll be pushing on quite hard. Whether we resolve anything, I don't know. If we can't resolve anything at Commission level or at European level, then we may have to be pressing the states to agree to be generous with each other in accepting movement from those who registered under this more generous scheme in one country who need to work in another country. But that's something that we will be focusing on because it's a big issue. Final thing I wanted to mention in terms of campaigning is more to do with UK pensioners who are living in Europe. But it's very important to remember here, and probably I think in Italy more than any other country, a UK pensioner does not have to be a UK citizen. If you think of the number of people who came from Italy to live in the United Kingdom, worked there, contributed their contributions and their taxes solely in the United Kingdom throughout their working lives, and then said, well, I'll go back home to where the family is. That's a very Italian, if you like, approach to all of this thing. And so there are an awful lot of UK pensioners living in the EU who are not British citizens. The UK's proposals in relation to pension increases are not very satisfactory at the moment, if I can put it as low as that. The UK has this wonderful habit of treating people who leave the sacred shores like dirt. They deprive them of the vote after 15 years, and they deprive them, if they possibly can, of the right to an increased pension, despite the fact they've made contributions at the same level as everyone else throughout their working lives. They do not deprive people of the increased pension if there is a reciprocal agreement with the country where they won't move to. So, for example, if you go and live in America, you get your pension increases. If you go and live in Australia, you don't. If you live in the EU at present under EU law, because there's a prohibition under EU law on discriminating against people on the grounds of residence, they have to pay the pension increases. The UK produced a proposal at the beginning of December in which they said we are fully committed to keeping pension increases for UK pension, no, for UK citizens was actually what they said, in the EU, and we have guaranteed this as far ahead as 2019-20. What we need to do is go back to them on that, because it's an outrage. I don't think the refusal of pension increases is justified in any part of the world, but it has been a hot political potato over the last 30, 40 years, and actually both parties, as soon as they get the government, back it, because it will cost quite a lot of money to pay pension increases to those who are resident abroad. But our situation is different, because we moved to Europe, whether to work or to live as pensioners, on the basis of a system which guaranteed us pension increases when we do so. And people do think about those things before they move. So it would be an outrageous moving of the goalposts after the event to say you can't have pension increases. There's a similar issue in relation to healthcare. The S1 form that Delia has mentioned is where for pensioners and for people who are posted workers, coming from the UK. The UK pays the healthcare which the various European countries provide. We want to ensure that they continue to make those contributions.
The S1 operates like a health insurance, if you like. It's accepted, where you're otherwise required to have health insurance if you're not economically active or you're paying into IMSS and contributing. So for anybody else, the S1 is actually vital.
To be fair to the UK, they have taken legislative steps to enable them to do that. But whether they actually do it is another matter. So that's the other area we'll be bringing pressure on. We'll be going to London, we'll be meeting with deputy officials. We're asking to meet with Department of Health and Department of Work and Pension officials who are dealing with these no-deal issues. That's where we are. We're trying to cover all the bases. It's a lot of work to be done in a very short time, and that's the main problem we face at the moment. Which I'll hand over to Cos to tell you about the other side of the story.